to the foundation today to, in dialogue with our own Dr. Jim Carafano, preview the Trump administration's forthcoming counterterrorism strategy. As I'm sure you all know, Sebastian Gorka serves as Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Counterterrorism on the National Security Council staff. A very difficult, demanding job, and I know we're all grateful for his service. He served in the first administration as strategist to the president, in which role I was honored to work with him on the president's first national security strategy. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Defeating Jihad, as well as Why We Fight, and most recently, The War for America's Soul. Most importantly about Seb, and the thing we are most pleased with here at the Heritage Foundation, is he is married to Katie Gorka. This is an alum of our organization and one of our favorites, co-author with Mike Gonzalez, so a couple with very deep roots here. And so we are excited, as I said, to get this preview of the strategy and to hear from both Seb and Jim.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you, Jim, for making this possible. Yes, as one of the members of the Gutter Press wrote about the Gorka family when I left the White House the first time, they said, "We got rid of him, but the really dangerous one's still in government," and that's Katie. So yes. I have so much to share with you. I hate giving, long lectures. I like telling stories and then taking question and answer and then having it moderated by my good friend who I've known for what? Long time, decades. And he is here after not too recently imbibing on Foster's and eating Tim Tams. So thank you for flying back from Australasia to be here today, Jim. And thank to Heritage, especially under the incredible its leadership, its mentorship of the late, great Ed Fulner, that turned boring think-tankery into do-tankery and was really responsible in a conservative revival after Ronald Reagan. So I doff my cap to all the people who made the success of conservatism possible in the last few years. So, counterterrorism. People ask me, how you enjoy the job? Well, I walk around the White House and the EOB with a ear-to-ear grin. I've been waiting about 26 years for this job. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I guess I'll have to be a farmer or a poet or something. When you've been studying counterterrorism for a quarter of a century and then you get to run counterterrorism and coordinate it for the most consequential president of the modern age, it really doesn't get much better than that, especially when you have an incredible team on the Counterterrorism Directorate. Some of whom are with me here today. And when you have people across government who are very different from the first Trump administration, people ask me, how different is it the second time round? Could not be more different. And I'll be very blunt here. We don't have traitors in the building. We don't have the likes of Mark Milley, who does more for the PLA in Beijing than he did for the President of the United States. We don't have, and this saddens me because I love the Marine Corps. I spent 2.5 years teaching at Quantico. We don't have truly seditious individuals like John Kelly as a putative chief of staff undermining the writ of the president, the commander-in-chief, and the will of 67 million Americans. You have my friends and buddies. You have Kash Patel running the FBI, Pam Bondi at the DOJ. You have John Ratcliffe at the CIA and Tulsi Gabbard at DNI, on and on and on. A team that has one connective tissue that binds them all, love of country. And they're getting stuff done. We live skiff life now. Well, my colleagues and I, we're in our skiff, 12, 13 hours a day. We come outside to check our cell phones and we say, oh my gosh, what did the president do in the last 30 minutes? We just can't keep up with him. Peace deal number 7. It is a challenge every day to keep up with a man who is writing history with everything he does. And the last thing I want to do is to put the counterterrorism slice of national security into the geopolitical broader context, because most people, even the experts in this cesspit that is Washington, D.C., have no idea of the enormity of what President Trump is doing. But I'll get to that in a moment. First, a few stories. Everybody loves a good story. On January the 20th, I was standing outside the White House campus, as we call it, with my bud in my ear and my phone broadcasting into my ear the president's swearing-in ceremony for the second time. Why? I am not Senate confirmed, thank the good Lord, which means at 12:01, as the president was raising his hand and swearing the oath of office for a second time, I would be permitted to start work in the National Security Council. I'd been assured the Saturday before that my digital entry card would let me through the turnstiles at 12:01 as Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Director of Counterterrorism. And fingers crossed, I went to the turnstile, scanned myself in, past the Secret Service agents, and walked onto the campus. Now, I'm old school, so when I got to my SCIF, my secure compartmented information facility, I said, I need a whiteboard. I need to clarify for myself the priorities of the president and for my team. And I found a whiteboard, I propped it up on one of our safes, and I got out the marker pen, and I wrote a list of 5 national priorities for the President of the United States when it comes to counterterrorism. 4 of them, well, all 5 of them were classified, but the first one I can now freely talk about since it has been declassified and since it, in fact, has been covered by the Daily Mail, the New York Post front page, so you can, verify it for yourself. And at the top of the list was the letter J. J was the nom de guerre of Jafar, the ISIS mastermind behind the Abbey Gate massacre of 13 of our brave warfighters. And for me, because the president had promised this to the members of those families who were needlessly murdered that day during the Biden rout of Kabul, I said to myself, I will do whatever it takes, move heaven and earth, along with Tulsi, along with John Radcliffe, along with Cash, to find Jafar and to kill him or bring him to justice on US soil. And to be brutally honest, I thought this would take at least 6 months. We knew roughly where he was, but it was a tough part of the world. Maybe a year to find him and neutralize him. 41 days later, at 2:30 in the morning, I was on the tarmac at Dulles, the day of the president's joint address to Congress. And I was standing there in the cold with members of my team, with Pam Bondi, Tulsi Gabbard, John Radcliffe, Kash Patel, and the biggest federal convoy I'd ever seen in my life. I had an FBI driver onto the apron, and I said to him as I was watching these SUVs pile into Dulles, have you ever seen a federal convoy? This is bigger. The president has like 3 dozen vehicles in his beast convoy. We had about 50 federal vehicles driving onto the tarmac. Why? Because thanks to the incredible work of those who hunt killers in the dark, the heroes of the intelligence community who support our warfighters, and thanks to a piece of exquisite intelligence they had garnered and shared with our colleagues in Islamabad, Jafar landed on US soil at 3 a.m., 41 days into the Trump administration, in handcuffs. And I got to walk up onto the deck of the aircraft and look into the eyes of that soulless animal from hell and see him escorted off the aircraft by members of the FBI and the CBP to go face charges and live the rest of his life in a supermax prison. That's what we do. That's what President Trump does. I was honored earlier that day when we'd confirmed he was airborne to stand next to the president as he made the phone calls to members of the 13 families to tell them before anyone else, to tell them before the speech to Congress, before anyone in the world knew, that I, Donald Trump, promised to bring you justice for your loved ones who were murdered that day, and we have succeeded to locate Jafar. Another story. Day 8 of the administration. I'd spent 8 days going across the interagency, talking to members of the intelligence community, Tier 1 operators, DOD, those whose job it is to locate and hunt down those who wish to kill innocent Americans. And it was an eerie experience because it was as if they'd all been issued the same talking points. Wherever I was, whichever headquarters, whichever basement element of the IC I was in, I was told the same thing. Please, can we do our job? We know where they are, and for 4 years, we haven't been allowed to kill them. Men with the blood of innocent Americans on their hands, jihadis who are plotting to kill our servicemen, their families, and innocent Americans here in the United States. And one of the most clear requests they had is, can we please have the rules of engagement from the first Trump administration? Because unbelievably, for the 4 years of the Biden administration, as we were told that Catholics going to Latin Mass in Richmond are the primary terrorist threat to America, or 72-year-old grandmothers taking selfies peacefully on January the 6th inside the halls of Congress, during that insanity, we, the intelligence community, were watching high-value targets roam freely across the world. And when those professionals wanted to arrest or kill those jihadis, they were forced by Jake Sullivan, the primary mover of the Russia hoax, crime against the US Constitution, the then National Security Advisor, was demanding to be told which jihadi do you wish to kill, and you are not allowed to do so unless I have the permission of the somnambulant President Joe Biden. Means he's asleep. We had the 8,000-mile screwdriver in Vietnam. During the Biden administration, we had the 8,000-mile joystick. Utter insanity. Eyes on, target acquired, and it had to go all the way from Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, Syria, all the way up to Jake Sullivan, the White House, and Joe Biden. Which of course meant what? Nobody was killed, or a handful of jihadis were killed. Day 8 of the administration, we had eyes on a leading member of ISIS, chief recruiter, financier, and trainer in the Golis Mountain region of Somalia. This is all declassified, it's in the Daily Mail. And we had exquisite collection on him. This is a man planning to kill Americans. We walked into the Oval Office with a map of that region, with a satellite photograph of the individual, and we said, Mr. President, this is with the National Security Advisor and a member of my team. Mr. President, we have been watching this key ISIS jihadi for 18 months, and he's currently in this location in Somalia. The President looked up from the Resolute desk and said to us, what do you mean we've been watching him for a year and a half? Kill him. He got out his iconic Sharpie pen, and on the operation orders, he ticked the go box. We walked out of the Oval. Less than 30 hours later, I was back in the West Wing on a Saturday morning at 8:45, 8:43, waiting for the National Security Advisor, who was running a bit late, in the Situation Room, watching from our feeds that man walking around without a care in the world in this terror complex of northern Somalia, until in walked the National Security Advisor, and like a Tom Clancy movie, but better because it's real, at exactly 8:45 to the nanosecond, that piece of human filth was turned into red mist. That was day 11. Since that time, our brave war fighters, our intelligence community assets, have killed 272 jihadis around the world who are planning to kill Americans or who had killed Americans. That is excluding those that were dealt ultimate justice in Yemen during our counter-Houthi operations. 272. And if that metric weren't enough, this is when it gets truly, you pinch yourself. My portfolio includes hostages, the liberation of hostages. And I can report to you as of yesterday, thanks to the indefatigable efforts of the Special Envoy for Hostage Affairs, Adam Bowler, thanks to Special Envoy Witkoff, thanks to Special Envoy Rick Grenell, thanks to the fusion cell at the FBI that deals with hostages and my counterterrorism team at the NSC, the President, has liberated 72 Americans in less than 7 months. The Biden administration liberated 80 in 4 years. In 4 years. We have done the same in less than 7 months. Why? Because hostages are also one of the top priorities for the president. We are on the cusp of being able to talk about openly the new counterterrorism strategy for the president. It will be preceded by the national security strategy that we worked on together with Victoria in the last administration. And I'll give you a little bit of a tease, if you will, a teaser of what to expect. It falls under the banner of a phrase from the first Trump administration, which is sustainable counterterrorism. Forever wars are over. We don't do that. We don't invade other people's countries and try to turn them into cookie-cutter versions of ourselves. We're not interested in dumb wars, stupid wars, forever wars, nation building or intervention. There's only one nation President Trump is interested in building. It's this nation. It's America. The second theme, given the fact that next year will be, incredibly, yes, do the math, the 25th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. The other label for what we are doing is we will finish the job. It is my intent, through various means, over a very short duration, to apply the ultimate tools of counterterrorism to so demoralize, decapitate, and make combat ineffective the most dangerous terrorist groups in the world that I will be put out of business. I want terrorism to no longer be a strategic threat to America. And it is possible with the leadership of President Trump and with our allies and partners who finally have a Washington that wishes to work with them and finish the job. I cannot tell you, I will not go into the names of the heads of state and the countries concerned, how many countries from Africa, from the Middle East, from around the world, from Australasia, are ecstatic despite what their mainstream media outlets may tell you, are ecstatic that we are back and we are a serious partner. And we won't lecture them on LGBTQ, LMNOP, transgender insanity, or shock them by saying that they have to have our embassies fly the rainbow flag in their nation's capitals. No, we are here to work with them to eradicate the common threats they face. One additional aspect of the counterterrorism strategy draft document is something I've been obsessing with since 9/11, and before that. Jim can give you chapter and verse, as can Victoria. My contention that we are the most exquisite counterterrorism kinetic platform the world has ever seen. If we know where you are anywhere in the world, we can kill you within 72 hours. But so what? If we can kill you and the threat group has an ideology with which they can recruit replacements for that lost target with ease, it's just mowing the grass. It's just Groundhog Day. To use a Clausewitzian phrase, the ultimate victory will come when we apply the requisite force to the center of gravity of the jihadi global movement, which is its ideology. Oh, and to that end, we are jettisoning the insane PC verbiage of the last administration. There are two types of terrorists from now on in the US lexicon of national security: jihadi terrorists and domestic terrorists. Period. End of story. That's it. No CVE, no agave, no REMV, these insane acronyms from the Biden administration. There are jihadis and domestic terrorists. As such, if that is their center of gravity, I propose a very aggressive counter-ideology campaign, working especially with our Muslim allies, with the Emiratis, the Jordanians, the Moroccans, to divest groups like Hamas, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Nusra of the thing that allows them to recruit a credible ideology. My intent is to make them look what they are: a bunch of hypocritical losers. I like to give the example of the second most important thing we brought back from Abbottabad after bin Laden's dead, lanky body, and that was, of course, his multiple hard drives, which were full of terabytes of pornography. The great scion, holy warrior of jihad, had multiple subscriptions to Pornhub. Yeah, holy warrior, my backside. That's how you defeat them. Make them look real. Show the world the reality of who they are. Oh, and one last thing, personal little bugbear of mine, which I think I'm just following the proud footsteps of Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel and my other colleagues. I wish to rip politics out of counterterrorism. The idea that the most powerful counterterrorism organizations in the world used the inordinate power of the FISA courts, of the intelligence community, of the Patriot Act for political purposes is utterly, utterly unacceptable. Whether it's grandmothers on January the 6th, whether it's the 5 defendants who did nothing on January the 6th except quote-unquote trespass, but when they were given terror enhancements by the Biden DOJ, chose to commit suicide rather than die in prison, including one Matthew Perner, whose aunt has become a dear friend of mine. If I die on the hill of getting politics out of counterterrorism, I will be a happy man. We have one mission in counterterrorism: to protect the innocent and to bring justice to evildoers, not people from the other party. That will not be permitted in the Trump administration. So I promised I'd close by putting this all into a much broader context of America first, the foreign policy of the president, and it's very simple. And most of the experts in DC really don't get it. We are being led, and the Western world is now being led, by probably the most historic president of the modern age, whose actions are in fact geopolitically tectonic. If we look at just the tariff system, if we look at what he's done simply with Golden Dome, with NATO. I cut my teeth on NATO issues 30 years ago. I dreamt of 2% GDP commitment from our allies. I was in my skiff watching Newsmax, and I saw this chyron from The Hague when the president was there 2 months ago. And I saw this lower third going, President Trump gets allies to commit to 5%. I was going to leave the skiff and call Chris Ruddy, my buddy, the CEO of Newsmax, and say, Chris, you've got this typo on the chyron. There's no way it's 5%. Are you nuts? And before I called him up, I actually went online. Oh yeah. He didn't get 2%. He didn't get 3%. He got 5%. Except for those dastardly Spaniards. Hey, come on, Madrid. Read the room. 5% NATO contribution. That's historic. Understand what is happening. Not just as an American. This is my message to all our partners and allies around the world. President Trump is one of the most successful businessmen of the modern age, and he is a conservative. Why? Because he jettisons and rejects the left's vision of the world. The left, I don't care whether you're a commie, socialist, Labour Party, they believe in a zero-sum game and a closed box. Meaning what? The pie can never grow. You must divide the pie. That's where redistribution of wealth comes from. What do we believe in as conservatives? We believe the pie can always be made bigger. So the message we have for the world, do you wish to prosper? Whether you're Rwanda or whether you're Saudi Arabia, then prosper with us. Join America, and we're going to be safe and prosperous together. Thank you.
Yes, I get to sit on the right. So we are old friends, but we have not had a chance to talk at all. So this is completely unrehearsed, and hopefully we'll get a bunch of questions in here. So what I want to do, if we can, is kind of start and unpack this thing to have the context of what we were talking about. So if you don't mind, let's start with the geography, and let me just walk through the different parts of the world that we're looking at and kind of give me a status report of where we are. Okay. So Afghanistan, Pakistan.
So I don't want to jinx it, but as I described in the story of capturing Jafar, that doesn't happen without the assistance of the Pakistani government. So right now, things are looking very good in terms of counterterrorism in Pakistan. I was in the sit room. I was closer to Marco than we are today when he was on the phone to both India and Pakistan during that very heated moment. So we've managed to come down from there. So regionally, things have stabilized. With regards to Afghanistan, some very promising things I can't give full details about are in motion right now, especially when it comes to US citizens who are being detained in Afghanistan. My greatest concern, and the Taliban, this sounds strange coming out of my mouth, but the Taliban have been moderately cooperative counterterrorism partners, because there are certain threat groups in their country, Muslim threat groups, that threaten them as well. Right. And so we're working together. We don't have a complete overlap in threats, but not bad. The biggest concern is, of course, and you understand this, is with the surrender of Kabul under Biden, it's very hard to see everything we need to see happening in that region. Can I leave it at that?
Yeah, right. But, so level of situational awareness, chance to integrate with actors, understanding of the threat. Okay, great news with the Azerbaijan-Armenia deal, incredible transformation in the South Caucasus, Central Asia really wanting to engage the United States. Okay, so then we walk over Iran.
Yeah. So my colleagues in the room could bear witness to me. So we have to host and chair interagency meetings, practically every day. And when it comes to the Middle East, I try to help my colleagues in government, especially the non-politicals, the professionals, understand a very simple thing about President Trump. He doesn't live in silos of excellence, okay? In government, I'm the Syria desk officer. I'm the Belgian desk officer. I do defensive cyber operations. I do threat finance. We have these incredible compartmentalizations, which is, understandable for government. President Trump, I don't care if you don't like him. I'll tell you the truth about him. I've known him for 10 years now. He is a preternatural geopolitical thinker. He doesn't slice the world into itty-bitty bits. And when he looks at the Middle East, he has an overarching geopolitical prism. And that prism, I tell all of my colleagues in government, is Iran. You may be the guy doing Libya policy. You may be the gal doing Syria policy. Get out of your little tube, your strategic, drinking straw, and understand whatever thing you're shaping or advising on must be put in the context of what the president cares about the most. And it was in his letter to the supreme leader. He said, we will, America, not permit you to acquire nuclear weapons. And secondarily, we will not permit you to persistently support Iranian proxies that are in fact terrorist groups. Those are the two conditions. And what happened 61 days after the letter? I was in the sit room again, Operation Midnight Hammer. That's the way the president looks at Iran, with a very specific and explicit proviso. We are not in the nation building regime change business. That is not why President Trump was elected. We wish the people of Persia, including the minorities, to live in a system that is not a theocratic Islamo-fascist dictatorship, but we're not in the regime change business. If they wish to liberate themselves, that's another issue. If Israel wants to help them, that's another issue. That's not our mission, but we will not permit you to get weapons of mass destruction.
Right. So much degraded capability to support the surrogates and transnational terrorists and hosting a bunch of folks, Al-Qaeda and whatever. So where are we going from here? Is the trend line down in Iran, or is there a lot more work to do?
The regime is the weakest it has ever been in a very long time.
And you want to keep it that way. Yeah. So then we've got this glop. We've got Syria, parts of Iraq, Lebanon, all that dramatic transformation there with the overthrow of the government in Syria.
Yeah.
So that's and we've still got some U.S. troops on the ground in Syria,
Yeah.
right? So.
Yeah, I will leverage your technical terminology, glop. So let me talk about the glop for a second. So with regards to Iraq is a choice to make. Iraq can remain in the box of being seen as an unreliable partner, that is an appendage of Iran. Really. Is that how you wish to be seen by us and most of our allies and friends? This is an election year. If I were the government of Iraq, I would like to try and sound a little bit Trumpian and leverage this historic moment and to say something like, okay, now we're serious about not being an appendage of Iran. Something exciting like that would resonate, I think, in the Oval Office and elsewhere. They've been decent partners in counterterrorism, but the influence of Iran is still too high. With regards to Syria, Syria is the dog that caught the bus, right? Yeah. Because there is no better catalyst than having the most powerful man in the world say, hey, why don't you make Syria great as well? Yeah. Which is what President Trump has done to Jelani, who is, yes, a former jihadi. He now represents himself as a Syrian patriot. Okay, if you wish to be the actual president of Syria, you have a number one top priority, which is to ensure the safety of all your citizens, be they Alawites, Druze, Christians, or Kurds. That is your number one job. We are working to try and make Damascus better at doing counterterrorism, because my boss, the acting National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio, because I've lived this, I don't want to get another email from him in the early morning saying, why did another massacre happen in Syria? What can we do about that? And we're working on options to make that harder for bad guys to do in Syria. My message to the constituent elements of that benighted nation is a very simple one. You have an opportunity now. You may not like how things panned out. We're very happy that thanks to Israel, Iran does not control a transit zone through that nation now, and that there is a new regime that is not friendly to Iran. As such, ask yourself a question, whether you're Mazloon, whether you're the Kurds, whether you're the Druze, whether you're whichever element. Do you wish to be part of the solution, and do you want a place at the table? Because we can probably help you, along with Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar, get you a place at the table. Because my fear is, and I don't do predictions, but my fear is, if you don't bite your tongue and sit at the table in Damascus, your children and your grandchildren will probably still be fighting a civil war 20 years from now. That's the incredible option Syria has, and for the time being, we will try to facilitate at least a quasi-Westphalian nation coming out of this.
All right, so one operational zone, you have Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, ongoing conflict. How does that fit into your work?
So it's important to understand why we did what we did with that massive, prior to Operation Midnight Hammer, the massive operation we executed against the Houthis. Again, you will be told lies, it will be misrepresented. The president's primary objective and the real catalyst for why he took that decision was trade. The fact that more than 140 times US ships had been fired on in the Strait, the fact that US naval vessels had been fired upon. Again, the president absorbs information and decides, and he said, we will not permit that to go on in the interests of the American economy and world trade. Just simply world trade. And luckily, the Houthis got the message with regards to that operation. And let me just use that as a little sidebar. This is another tip I try to give everybody in government right now. The president is one of the most successful businessmen of the modern age, which means when you talk with me at NDU, we talked about the toolkit of statecraft, the different bits, like we have the military, dime, defense, intelligence, law enforcement. He doesn't think in these compartmentalized ways. He doesn't say, oh, diplomacy's over here, Pentagon's over there, oh, and Besant is doing stuff over here. No, we're doing everything interlaced at the same time. How do I illustrate this? The first disastrous meeting of Zelensky in the Oval. Why was that about rare earths? This is about, warfare in Europe. This is about young Ukrainians being massacred, Russian conscripts dying by the bushel. Well, because a piece of paper from NATO is worth about as much as the piece of paper. Remember, Chamberlain in 1938, peace in our time, Mr. Hitler has signed, right, okay. But if you have a strategic deal that brings thousands of Americans to Ukraine, dozens or scores of companies to work on common trade and commerce ventures, isn't that going to make Putin think twice about doing anything? Why do we have this overlay always of trade and commerce? Because that's the real world. We can't hermetically seal diplomacy from FMF, from defense. The president approaches it holistically, and that must be better appreciated. It's why he went to the Middle East, and it's incredible. Inside the White House, we were like, fingers crossed, he comes back with $1 trillion worth of deals. We said, maybe I'll get $1 trillion. And he comes back with $5 trillion. Why? Because 8 years ago, he went there with one very simple message: security. Remember? Right. The speech in the Hijaz, get the jihadis out of your mosques, let's defeat ISIS together. Security. 8 years later, the message was, okay, we've got the security, we're going to move to prosperity. the prosperity part of what we do together is often missed by the quote-unquote experts.
Okay, almost done. Sahel, Africa?
Okay, so the week before the inauguration, I was in the White House getting my transition briefs from the outgoing team. Not the politicals, they'd left, they'd been crying in the corridors and left. But the professionals who were left there briefed me on what we were inheriting after the 4 years of disastrous Biden policies. And I doffed my cap. They were pros. And nothing was a surprise except when they showed me the map of Africa and the dispersion, especially of ISIS. So that gives me a few sleepless nights. But again, there's also a silver lining. Why is ISIS running around parts of ungoverned Africa? Because we're bloody good at counterterrorism in the Middle East. Right? We crushed ISIS. We've made it very hard for you to have training camps, even in Central Asia. So we squeezed them so hard, they had to find a new playground. And in many cases, what they're doing is they're trying to leverage pre-existing conflict, which is often tribal and ethnic, and the overlay of the global jihadi, caliphate doesn't always mesh with older conflict. So yes, it's a problem because we don't have ISR, we don't have as much intelligence penetration on the continent. But again, good news, we have some, and I'm not going to name them, numerous partners who want to help us in that region because they are also targets of the jihadis. But Africa is probably the one that I find most disturbing.
Latin America, you got ICE, you got.
You said that was the last question.
I know. I said we're almost done. You got lots of Islamic groups running around. You also have transnational terrorism. You got the Chinese and Russians. Good.
This could be a whole different lecture. So I've done a couple of trips since I've started working in the White House.
Take 60 seconds. Good.
But this is a really important question. Our colleagues, especially in Europe, and they're using the wrong label, they're calling it hybrid threats. No, sorry. But we are both struggling with the phenomena of nation-state actions that look like terrorism. What, as Cold War warriors, what we used to call covert action. We've forgotten that label, but there's more and more of it cropping up, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Russia in Europe, whether it's lethal plotting again. I have the lethal plotting portfolio, when they're trying to kill the president or, people involved in the Soleimani operation. We as allies have to grapple with this recrudescent threat of something that isn't non-state terrorism, but is actual state actors or state actors using surrogates, but it's actually run and financed by national capitals. That's a new threat from a prior age.
Yeah. Okay. So last one, right? So you have all the stuff that bleeds over across into the U.S. border, and the global laydown that bleeds over, and groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and their affiliates in U.S. Light Care. So how does that fit into your portfolio?
My gosh, he really wants to get me in trouble. I'll just quote my boss, Marco Rubio. I think it's probably high time we took a very close look at the Muslim Brotherhood and how we categorize it in the United States and elsewhere. Can I leave it at that?
Give me the balance between the domestic and what you're seeing globally. So how much is the domestic worrying you right now?
Domestically, it's less a function of operational ties to kinetic acts. Although, and this is open source, the Colorado attacker who tried to kill those Jewish survivors of the Holocaust and burn them alive had a nexus to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Okay, so this is not classified. So there are points of connection. The broader problem here domestically is the ideological thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you've got foreign monies, non-state actors pumping a lot of money into America, and you end up having events on Harvard Square where people are chanting from the river to the sea. Those things aren't accidents.
So I just want to state the obvious here, which is that's not a bad report card from a year ago, right? Which actually, so the things that you talked about in your things of what we're kind of looking for in the strategy, where if that is a speech you'd give it on say one, somebody would say that's deeply aspirational. Right. But there's
trying to keep up with the president.
There's a lot better lay down today than a year ago, and it's to the point that this has gone from something that's an aspirational thought to something that you can actually operationalize. So that's really interesting. So just I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to maybe take a couple of questions from the audience, package them together, and let you round out.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of a geeky or technical question, which is, this is a very differently run government than most previous administrations. It's a very cabinet-run government, right? It's very different. And the role of the staffs in the White House staffs are different, particularly in the National Security Council, which really functions much more as a secretariat for the National Security Council, which is the cabinet, not just the president, right? But
you are geeking out.
Yeah, I know.
Really.
But there are some things that are a little different, right? And I think counterterrorism is one of them.
Yes.
In terms of the level of interaction and the level of leadership at the Oval Office, and how the interagency functions in real time.
Yes.
So could you maybe just talk about that for a second?
Do I really give away all my secrets here? The nice thing about counterterrorism is somebody told me, you might have heard of him, Michael Duran.
Heard of him.
Because he was in the White House not too long ago. Counterterrorism touches pretty much everything. From IO to special forces to naval operations in the Straits. I mean, CT is very unusual in terms of the expanse upon which it covers. Secondly, inside the NSC, there are certain elements that are not just policy, but also touch a little bit on operational aspects. The Intelligence Directorate is one of them, and so is CT. So we are returning to a reality-based understanding of what the NSC is for. And then lastly, we're really driven by tempo. If you look at whether it's Midnight Hammer, if you look at Jafar, if you look at all the border, I mean, literally shutting down the border to 3 crossings in a month. Yeah. It's a question of alacrity. When you have, you're a veteran, commander's intent. When the commander's intent is simply get it done, we don't necessarily need another policy coordination committee meeting. Get it done. That's the esprit de corps.
So is it simple to say is that, particularly in this area, the interagency interaction is driven by outcomes, from clearly understanding the objectives and the outcome the presidents want. And it's not based on let's build a process and then we'll put things through a process. It's we have particular outcomes you have to do, and we're going to structure an action to achieve that outcome.
When you have a commander who says seal the border, when you have a commander who says they will not acquire nuclear weapons, there's no deliberation. They will not be acquired, will not be permitted to acquire nuclear weapons. Okay, so how do we make that happen? We drop 34,000 pound bombs on Fordo, Natanz, and the third base, right? It's very much when you have clear objectives, much of what you need to do falls into place.
Okay, maybe we'll take a couple of questions.
Yeah.
We'll take maybe one, if we just get a question, and then sir, you got a question, those 3 questions, and we'll package those for you. So if you could make them pretty tight, that would be great. And then we'll go, but I'd just like to say, one of the reasons it appears to me, for somebody that worked on the Trump's first presidential transition team, and correct me if I'm wrong, counterterrorism seems to be one of the things where the president and the senior team came into office day one with really a fully baked concept for execution. Is that fair?
Correct, and a very simple guiding principle. We trust the people we've trained to do the job. Let them do the job.
Okay, so quick question.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sibel with USA Today. Thanks for doing this. I'm wondering, how is the administration using a counterterrorism strategy to target cartels in Latin America?
Okay, hold that. And over here? Ladies first.
Dr. Sarah Harmouche, CEO of H9 Defense. I want to ask, how are you looking at Iran's relationship with al-Qaeda, which has been evolving and seems to be filling a gap in the weakening of its proxy? Iran's focusing on al-Qaeda and building alliances with that. And then with emerging tech, al-Qaeda also seems to be building back up its weapons of mass destruction program. How are we looking at non-state actors in WMD?
Okay.
Thank you for your briefing. My name is Johannes Mesga from Ethiopia. My question is regarding your policy for the Horn of Africa. So do we have a policy as Washington? Does you have like a policy for the Horn of Africa in general, not just specifically even for the counterterrorism? Because as I was speaking, for example, Somalia, my friend who runs the counterterrorism for the government, he was telling me he has hostages.
Thank you.
How are you dealing with that?
Got it.
All right, so we got transnational cartels, al-Qaeda, which is a really interesting question because that laydown has changed dramatically in 2 years, and then in the last 6 months even, and then Horn of Africa, which is a regional issue that we just kind of skipped over. So there you go.
I'll do it in reverse. So I'll give you a kind of cheat code to our general policies for any region. And it's not understood that what America First and MAGA means. America First does not mean America alone. And much of what the president says and does is driven by a very simple concept. If you don't exercise sovereignty over your territory, you're not a country. When you dismantle the borders, like Harris and Biden did, you're not a functioning country. And our argument is every country, including the countries of the Horn of Africa, should be able to do what better? Exercise sovereign control of their territory. Why is ISIS hanging around Central Africa? Because there is the classic prerequisite for terror training camps, ungoverned space. So our primary objective, not nation building, is where possible to assist those nations that share a threat to build their capacity to exercise sovereignty. That also goes for countries like Syria. With regards to al-Qaeda, so there's lots of different aspects of that, including al-Qaeda's senior leadership and the various branches today. Al-Qaeda is in a fight to prove relevance in an age where ISIS is far more adept at social media. The ISIS social media product is in more than a dozen languages right now. AQ can't do that. AQ senior leadership is from the 1980s and 90s. So they're in a branding struggle with ISIS. What was the second part of your question? I can't talk about that in this forum. And then amongst the brands, the one that concerns me the most, although I want to kill everybody in Al-Qaeda senior leadership, I want them, I want the earth salted above their graves. AQAP. AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, is being more aggressive of late, so it's kind of bumped itself up the list. Cartels, I'm not the guy for cartels. Happy to have Stephen Miller connected with Jim and get him here. The strategy is in process right now, but can I just put it in context from my prior life as a TV host? I did a special on the cartels and the need to designate them as FTOs, and I did the math. And if you don't believe it, I'm not surprised, but do it yourself. Since the end of hostilities in 1945, if you add up every KIA until today, so that's all Americans killed in Korea, Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Gulf 1, Gulf 2, GWAT, Afghanistan, the total is 103,000 Americans in uniform killed. In the Biden administration, I did this for my Newsmax show, I went to the CDC website during the second year of his open border policies. It's hard to find, but it was on the CDC website. In one 12-month period, 110,000 Americans were killed by fentanyl and illicit drug overdoses. More Americans were killed because of Biden and Kamala Harris's open border policies than 75 years of combat fatalities. That's why we're at war with the cartels, and that's why President Trump designated them.
Right. So I'm going to try to squeeze in two very quick questions at the end. So When George Bush rolled out the global war on terrorism, that created as much friction and backlash as actual progress. Trump's first term on every issue, he was butted heads with everybody. You hear no pushback on the counterterrorism strategy. You hear enormous cooperation with European leaders, leaders in the Middle East, Latin America. What changed?
Somebody I know told me a story before the inauguration that he was traveling the world talking to people in Europe and elsewhere who, despite what some of their representatives may have said publicly about Donald Trump, were very excited that he was coming back as president. Because if you live in the real world, you understand that when America leads, you will be safer. It's really that simple. And as Mike Waltz pointed out, I think our first NSC meeting, week one, he said, the mistake the detractors made is they thought that President Trump has been golfing for the last 4 years. This administration, this year, right now, is his phrase, Mike Waltz, the 9th year of the Trump administration. Because we spent the last 4 years working very hard. You helped in transition 8 years ago. We did not take a break for the last 4 years, and we came in cocked and locked, ready to roll, because we knew what had to be done.
So it's just simple as he's getting cooperation because he's delivering results.
Yeah, and because people realize that he can get stuff done.
All right, so this is your 30-second question, which is, we haven't seen a published strategy. You're not going to tell it, but we've seen through action what the strategy is.
Yeah.
And so the question is what is this strategy going to tell us that we don't know now?
It's gonna.
And
I've
but this is the point. People think strategy is a document.
Yeah.
They don't understand that strategy is a driving idea that makes government act.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I have pulled my life's work into this document. It is now 12,000 words long. I'm not sure it's going to survive the scalpels of the interagency fully. I've been doing this for a quarter of a century. Anything I think of value is in this document. But even if it gets cut, I summarize it into one page, by the way, which will be unclassified, and I'll share that with you as soon as my boss has cleared it. I've squeezed it down to one page, hopefully the page that will be pinned up in all the cubicles across the US government. It's very simple. We're going to finish the job, and we're going to make you safe.
Lifeline of a guiding idea. Thank you for your service. Thank you for coming today. Great, man. Appreciate it. Well done.